So then we're on to our number one, physical
Number
touch.
one. I just want
Yes.
to let you know this one is very important.
Okay, but
It's
let's
very
dive into
important.
this. So when it comes to physical touch,
Mm.
um, because I had okay, so is physical touch just about like fornicating, about kissing, about hand holding? Is it really about the romanticism behind it, or is it about the physical connection?
I want to.
Because
I
you could
want to
have,
be greedy and say both.
because you can fornicate with somebody, and not have it like people have one night stands all the time, and it's like, is that really fulfilling
It's
your
really not.
your physical touch, body
No.
language, or is it one of those like I need somebody that I connect with, one of those it's not just a fornication, it's really like I connected with you, it was our souls, we made love, that kind of a thing.
All right. For me, it's about the connect. Like for me, like I really need the connection with somebody,
Hmm.
but like I also just like. Guess we'll just dive into it. Like it's just like
Here we go.
I like we
Put your floaties
for
on.
yeah, put the floaties on. I really need the physical touch aspect of it. Hand holding, like the slight touchings of like the arm, the side, the leg, just whatever, anything.
Hmm.
Like cuddling, um, playing with my hair. That's like my favorite thing. Nobody ever does it. Anyways, um, I just think like those kinds of things is really important. I find them really important. And it just makes me no, it makes me happy. It makes me feel like I'm loved. Because when I'm not getting it, I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
See,
Just for
I
our clarification, I was not getting that in my last marriage. So sorry, not sorry.
whoops. Well, it's like because and again, we're diving into the psychology of it, that because of the trauma that I like endured as a kid and all of that, and then like the
Mm,
whole being raped and stabbed,
mm.
um, I did not want to be touched. That's why I was like surprised. Like, I mean, it's been like years, but I'm still surprised that physical touch is my number one language because I generally don't like being touched.
You know what that
Like,
shows? You know what that shows?
what?
That you have done a lot of healing
Yeah.
since then, and you've come like on the top of things.
I put myself through like so I became a life coach. Like Jay was a huge part of it because his PTSD and I wanted to help people with PTSD. And then through his PTSD, I realized that I had PTSD. And so then after he died, I went through therapy. And so through therapy and all of that, like I realized that I didn't want to be a therapist. Like no offense to therapists, but you're stuck in an office, you
Mm,
know?
hmm.
Like, okay, well, I'll see you next Tuesday at, 3 o'clock, and you have to try and make it until then. Like, I'm sure you can call and be like, hey, I need to have an emergency session, but you're back in the office.
Right.
And I did not find that helpful. Like I needed somebody to be out like in the real world with me. Like I can't stand crowds and that's a whole different story. But like a lot of the sensory issues, like I needed somebody to physically be there with me. And a therapist couldn't do that. So that's why I became a life coach because I wanted to be that person.
Who, who, who started that?
Yes. But I really just
Just curious.
I wanted to do it to where I could be out there like in the streets, in reality, in the moment, helping people. And so
You did a
like
good job.
I took all these classes, $3,000 later, I learned from the amazing man himself, Tony Robbins, and I felt like it was totally worth it. Yeah, you were like my first client without being a client.
I
But
had perks,
I
man. I
guess you
had
could
perks.
say, like, if you're like, don't be like biased or anything like that. Like, do you feel like having somebody in the moment with you was helpful?
Yes.
Like, do you think that if you were just like 9 to 5, or not 9 to 5, but like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, come to my office, do you think that would have helped?
No, it never did help me. So this dives into like my childhood a little bit. I had to go to a lot of therapy
Hmm.
after my parents divorced because I was just having a hard time with it. I don't know if necessarily I was having a hard time with it or they just wanted to make sure that I would be okay. Um but like sitting there and the therapist I had was just mean. Was mean.
Mean?
Yes. So like I went in there and I would tell him I'm like, obviously I used to be a daddy's girl until I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what time, like what age I really stopped. Maybe like 8 or 9. Like I was just like, okay, this isn't like I can't do this anymore. It's also because I learned some things. We're
Hmm.
just not going to talk about it. But like I
Yeah.
learned some things about it, and it was like one of those things like kind of opened your eyes a little bit, and you're like, oh, well, that's not okay.
Hmm.
And so because of that, I had a really hard time on the weekends that I would stay at my dad. And so the therapist was like, "Well, why don't you come up with games? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" I literally made my own games. Like I made like my own boards of the games on paper, made like the little things that, like the little tokens that you can move around with, came
Yeah.
up with this whole thing and like he never played them with me. It was always about what he wanted to do, which was absolutely nothing or go fishing or hunting. And I'm sorry, I'm not that kind of girl. So like maybe I used to be when I was 6, but that's because I kind of had to. But I'm a mermaid. I don't like catching fish. I just swim with them, okay? That's how that works. But because of that, because of how he was like, "Well, I don't think you're trying hard enough. I don't think you could be doing more." He's not
Hmm.
interested because you're not doing enough. I just made a whole damn game. I'm like 9 years old. Are
Yeah.
you kidding me? And so it was just his attitude towards it and he never like helped me. He
Hmm.
never actually helped me. And then like we saw another therapist and kind of the same scenario, but they weren't as like you could be doing more. It's just like, oh, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried this? And I'm just like, yeah, didn't work. Well, what about
Yeah.
this? Yeah, it didn't work. And they're like, oh. And so like we went down all the options and they're like, oh, well, I don't know. Like it was like one of those, well, like I don't know what you can do. Try them again. And I'm like,
Like
are you kidding me?
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so like for me, like actual going to therapy, I hate it. I hate it so much.
Hmm.
Because all they wanted, and the other thing that they wanted to do was just stuff medicine down my throat.
Hmm.
And like, yeah, it helps for a time, but for me personally, medicine, I just actually had this conversation today. Depression medicine and like anxiety medicine, yes, it helps for a time, but for me, it doesn't fix like the overall feeling that I have because even though I'm taking them, I still feel anxious. I still feel like super jittery when certain things happen. Because of my anxiety, like I always feel like the like impending doom kind of feeling.
Hmm.
Like I'm always feeling that because I'm anxious. But like I've
Yeah.
learned to actually because like talking with you and stuff, like I've just learned, not to let it affect me as much.
Hmm.
But it's because like I feel like it's because we literally like just talked about everything and dissected everything
Yeah.
that like, oh, well, this is why this happened. And you're just kind of like, oh, but, like, I actually stopped taking my medication because it was making me feel like a numb, empty shell of myself,
Hmm.
and I really hated doing that. So,
Yeah,
the
I
fact that I don't have
found,
to do that anymore is really nice.
well, I found holistic ways to go around it,
Mm,
like, because I felt like putting you on medicine is only a band-aid. It's
Yeah.
not going to actually solve the issue. And I feel like you actually need to talk about it, but you need to physically do something about it
Mm,
other than, oh, well, I'm going to talk to you for an hour. Time's up because now you're magically healed for this hour, you know? And I felt like I found exercises, but I found like exercises and stuff like that that like worked your mind, body, and your soul when it
mm,
came to whatever issues you were having, you know?
right.
Yeah.
No, it definitely helped. I think the other biggest thing for me was that so there's like two things in my life that I always held back talking about. And one of them was like the stuff that happened with like my dad. And
Mm-hmm.
then, the stuff that happened like with my ex-husband Scott, who's no longer with us. Talking about my feelings towards that,
Mm-hmm.
helped a lot. So,
Yeah.
keeping it like on the inside was not like that wasn't doing me any good. So the fact that I was able to sit and talk about it with someone who understood that
Yes.
made it easier. So we're very like-minded in that. So
Mm-hmm. Your top three biggest X takeaways um that life has handed you.
takeaways from the exes, is that what you said?
Yeah. Like if you would say
Um
like these are the top three lessons that I took away.
all right, so with my ex-husband Scott, um I guess, like, in a sense, it would be the value of life, like you said, like,
Hmm.
with Jay and stuff like that. Because like, the
Yeah.
weird thing about it is I didn't even know that he died until, like, way later. Like, he didn't even make it past his 21st birthday, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
And, I think that hit the hardest because I think that we got married when we were very young, like, literally right after high school. So, like, it's one of those things I feel like we got married way too young. And if we would have waited a little bit, we probably would have been fine.
Hmm.
And if he got help, like you have to know when you need help and like
Yeah.
you have to be okay with being told, "Hey, that's not okay. You need help. Like go talk to
Hmm.
somebody." And he was definitely one of those mindsets that like if I said anything, he was like, "Oh no, I'm not doing that. I'm fine. Nothing's wrong with me." Um
It's like,
He was also a little on the abusive side, and I learned to never go through what my mom went through.
hmm.
Um, and that's one of the main reasons why we got divorced. He raised his hand to hit me, and I said, "No, thank you. Get out." And I never looked back. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I like going into a relationship or learning, when you talk to someone new, if I see any signs of that anywhere, I'm like, okay, bye.
Hmm.
'Cause I'm not gonna play with that. It's like one of those, is this gonna be a thing? Because if it is, then I'll see myself out. I'm not gonna do
Yeah.
that.
It's not worth it.
Um, in, 2014, it was
Hmm.
after my breakup with really bad person.
Yes.
Um, I don't know, I guess my takeaway is that, like, don't be comfortable. Like, if you're not happy, then say so, and then
Yeah.
try to fix it. Because if you don't fix it, if you can't fix it, then just leave. It's better off leaving than staying. And my problem is I stayed. I stayed 8 years. I should not have stayed. I should have left. And always look for signs. Always look for signs because like they were cheating, like my supposed best friend and him were cheating on me for over a year and I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Maybe because I was dumb, but I literally had them sitting in front of me. I said, "Hey," because we were talking about it, and I'm like, "If you guys ever cheat, like, let's talk about it. Like they could have told me right then and there.
Yeah, like just be
And
honest
they
about
didn't.
it.
And they didn't. They didn't tell me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I still have not talked to her to this day. She will not talk to me, which is fine. I mean, it's you're the one who made the mistake, not me. I
Yeah,
didn't do that.
that's one of those that says more about her than it does about you.
And so just to point this out too, like nobody's perfect. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
has flaws. And so like
Yeah.
I'm not perfect to be with. I have my own flaws. There's some days like when I go through depressive bouts or something. Everybody goes through them. Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so like don't judge somebody because like you have to give like 60% one day and that person's only giving 30 because that's all they could give. That's fine. The next day or whenever you're having like 30 and they're giving 70 and they're not bitching about it. Maybe you should just take it. So like
Yeah.
it was just back and forth stuff like that. So like just don't settle. I didn't learn that till way later though. Like it took me a couple years. But I figured it out. I figured it out. So and then so last one, third one, I guess. I guess it ties in kind of with the second one. I feel like I had to learn the same lesson twice.
Sometimes if you don't get it, so I'm a huge believer that if you do not get a life lesson the first time, it's going to circle back around. And it's going to get harder and harder each time that life tries to teach you this lesson until it like Sparta kicks your ass and then you finally get it.
I feel that was this last one for me.
Yes. And that wasn't even directed at you. That was just generally speaking because
No,
I've
no,
been
I
Sparta
know.
kicked by life before.
So with my ex-husband, and don't get me wrong, I loved him. It was not about not loving each other.
Hmm.
And this is one of those things where love is not always enough. And life kicked us really hard. And this goes to like last year. We had three of my pets die,
Hmm.
and they practically died in my arms.
Yes.
Two of them died because whatever causes they had, and the third one, I didn't have a choice. Like I didn't have a choice because of his mental problems, and we wasn't really sure what was going on. He was 18. The testing that they could have done for him, they wouldn't really know if it would work. And so they're like, "Hey, he lives like a long life." It was a very I sat in that room for like forever. And so I'm like, "All right, like I don't know what else to do." I didn't,
Hmm.
they're like, "You can spend all this money, try to make him comfortable, but if we find out he's in pain, do you want him to live that way?" And I
Yeah.
obviously don't want him to live that way. So that's why I made the ultimate decision to put him down. And so when you go through loss like that in a marriage, it's really hard if the other person, especially if the other person is going through their own stuff.
Hmm.
And so, like, he hated his job. He didn't want to be there. He was going through his own things. And so I like to point out that, I always ask, like, what can I do to help? How can I help? That that goes a long way. Like
The
people don't
acts of
realize that.
service right there. Yeah.
It goes a long way. And so I would ask him, how can I help? The thing that upset me the most is that I would be like, well, how can I help? Because like, oh, I wish you would do more around the house. What do you want me to do? Because you want me to wipe your ass for you? Because that's literally the last thing that I could do.
I wipe down the counters, I'm off the floors, let me wipe your ass.
So like, I didn't know what else I could do to help. Like, and all he had to do, like, because he gave me the opportunity to be stay-at-home wife.
Hmm.
And if that was too much for him and he wanted me to go out and get a job, that's all he had to say is, "Hey, I can't do this anymore. Could you just get a job? I don't even care if you're working like 10 hours a week. Just all that's all he had to say was like, "Hey, just if you could do something for a little bit." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, I'll do that." But he's like, "No, you're doing perfect. It's fine. You can't do anything more." But yet you just told me that you wish I would do more. Like you're
Yeah.
contradicting yourself. So like watch for signs, man. Watch for signs. The only thing I could say is that I did not stay in it as long. Like I saw the similarities to it and I'm like, I can't live like this. Can't live like this.
Yeah.
Especially like when love languages are important. They're very important. And if you're not getting your needs met and nothing is being met, then why stay in a place that you're unhappy?
Hmm.
Just just leave. It's not that big of a deal. You'll be much happier on your own looking for somebody else or waiting for the right person than you will be being with the wrong person.
Yeah.
And I think that he and I were better off friends.
My top three biggest takeaways was pretty much just with Jay that life is so precious, and even with my own experience of me killing myself and was brought back to life and everything like that, and the simple fact that I felt like I because I told the paramedics, do not tell my family that I died, like do not
Right.
tell them that you literally had to shock me back to life,
Right.
because I don't think they would have honestly cared, or they would have honestly done anything about it. I
Right.
think it would have caused more harm than good.
Right.
Um, that with me myself giving up my own life for, and it wasn't Jay, I think was just the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
That was really everything else that led up to then him dying. That the meaning of actual life is so much more important.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I'm huge, even though I was pagan for so many years, and now I'm a born again Christian, but I do think that God brought my ex-husband into my life for a reason. I think he was, maybe that's why we didn't connect and our
Mm.
marriage didn't make any sense. But I think it's because God used him as a tool. And I feel like people
Right.
come in our lives to teach us something, whether it's to teach us a life lesson, teach us something about ourselves, teach us something about another person. Um, the story with him was that
I almost made a really naughty joke. I'm so sorry. I've almost came out.
I here over here like hee hee
I had some people teach me some things. No, I'm just kidding.
hee. So I feel like my ex-husband was brought into my life for like one of those reasons, and it's a feeling, and I hope everybody at some point in their life has this feeling. Whether you believe in God, whether you believe in multiple gods, whether you believe in nothing, you're all about the Big Bang Theory, whatever your situation is, spiritually, religiously, whatever. I hope everybody has this feeling. That feeling where something comes over you and you can't explain it. There's a voice that's not your voice. It's one of those like divine interventions. And
Hmm.
it tells you, because I was in, I think her name was Mrs. Krebs, like English class. And I was always really studious. So I got there early, had my little notebook set up and everything. And something came over me. And it was one of those like, the next person that walks in that door, there's something about them, and I have to get to know them. It could have been anybody. He could have been like a serial killer. It could have been anything, you know.
Right.
Person that walked through was my ex-husband. And he sat next to me. And for whatever reason, I was like, I need to get to know this person. And it ended up being the person I married. And I think that he was brought into my life because he got me out of California.
Right.
And if it wasn't for him and my family being okay with me going with him, even though there was all this drama about me leaving the state, there's dogs outside barking. But
Listen to me. No, I'm just kidding.
right, it's my doggy friends. They're like, oh, the light's on, she's home. But I feel like he was brought into my life to get me out of the state of California,
Right.
and that
To the
if
good old state of Texas.
right, I was deep in the heart of Texas.
This isn't the
And
greatest place.
I mean, I will say everything was definitely bigger in Texas.
I mean,
Just gonna say everything was bigger. Everything
not
was
everything is.
D longer.
Womp womp.
But yeah, so that was um that life is very precious. Everything happens for a reason. And don't think that something happens for shits and giggles, you know, that everything is going to lead you somewhere. And with Frank, the biggest takeaway was being present, be in the moment, and really just shut out the world and just be existing, just the two of you.